and Craig Smoak.
4 o'clock hour, we start with Pete Mundo, again, Heartland College Sports, and I was on with him earlier today. They have a podcast, the Heartland College Sports. Go and subscribe to it, like it if you can. Watch what they do, the content as they cover the Big 12 and college football. Pete, thanks for your time with Paul, Craig, and Smokey. You and I talked quite a bit about Baylor, but we asked this question earlier about, of the 4 games, TCU's at West Virginia, Oklahoma State at Kansas State, Baylor at Tech, and then Oklahoma and Iowa State. Of those 4 games, is there a specific team that you think this week has even more of a must-win than anybody else?
Wow, that is a great question, guys. So, must-win, I mean, I look at Baylor, to be honest. Because if Baylor loses this game to Texas Tech, the hopes of repeating as Big 12 champs is over. It's done. It's really not going to happen if they lose this game to Texas Tech on Saturday. So I for the last couple of weeks, it's been trendy to say, okay, I like TCU Oklahoma State 2 weeks ago was the best game. Last week, I like Oklahoma Texas. It's trendy to say that, but with how loaded and unpredictable the Big 12 is, I've been looking at a lot of these games as elimination games the last 2 weeks. Last week, I thought Baylor-Kansas was the most intriguing game because the winner of that game is feeling like, okay, we still got a chance in this Big 12 race that is topsy-turvy. The loser is like, okay, this isn't going to be our year. We're just out of the race at this point. And I look at that Tech-Baylor game as kind of the same way this week. It's an elimination game for the Big 12 championship race. If Tech wins it, I mean, they become right up there with Kansas as the surprise team in the Big 12. And if Baylor wins it, you're saying, okay, you've lost some games this year, but you put together a couple in a row. And you're still in the thick of the Big 12 championship hunt with, a handful of games left in the final months of the season. So I really think it's this elimination game between Tech and Baylor that's the most intriguing to me in Big 12 play this weekend.
Do you think the loser of that game will have trouble getting to 6 wins?
Oh, boy. Smokey and I were talking about that earlier. This is what's great about the Big 12. And the answer to that is yes, simply because you can make a case for just about every team in the Big 12, at least 7 or 8 of them, to win the rest of their games or to lose the rest of their games. And that's what has made this, to me, in 25, 30 years of Big 12 football, the most intriguing year. I don't know, and I don't think there's a college football playoff team in this league, and the national media is going to do what the national media does and poo-poo that and try to get 2 SEC teams in there and do what they do. But top to bottom, this is, and the advanced metrics show this. This isn't me being a Big 12 homer. The advanced metrics show the Big 12 and the SEC are right there as the best conferences and the deepest conferences in America. I think we're watching that play out. And here we are, the final week in October, and you can still make a case for almost half the league in a best-case scenario to make a conference championship game. There's not another league in America that comes close to having that conversation right now. And that's why, this is an awesome time to be a Big 12 fan.
Pete, plenty of times in the past, Morgantown has been a place where teams with championship dreams go to die. I think of, a big Baylor loss they had years ago, a big Kevin White game that, crushed their hopes of playing for a national title. And there's been plenty of other examples over the years. Not quite that same, sense surrounding Neil Brown right now, but they do have TCU coming in unbeaten at number 7. Just your feel for this game and, TCU right now getting that win last week, how well you see the Frogs' position at the moment.
Well, I think they're in a great position for this weekend, not because, it can't be a trap game and they can't trip up after a couple of big wins. They came back from double digits down to beat Oklahoma State after being down 17. You're down 18 to K-State. You come back, you win. At some point, that's going to come back to bite you. I just can't see it being this weekend in Morgantown. Neil Brown, it's really an indictment on this coaching staff, the way they played as of late, especially on the road. They were down 28-0 to Texas before you blinked. The way they played this past weekend against Tech, they should have lost 48-3. That's embarrassing. This is not a program that talent gap is a 38-point difference with Texas Tech. It's just not. And I know they got the win over Baylor, on that Thursday night, but if Blake Shapen doesn't get injured in that game, they probably lose that game. So the fans aren't showing up. Neil Brown kind of quasi-called out the fans after that Thursday win against Baylor. He said something like, for the fans that showed up, it was a great night. The fan base has completely turned on Neil Brown. He does not have a program-defining win in 4+ seasons. Now, I guess he could get it on Saturday, but here's the thing. Even if he wins this game, Neil Brown's not going bowling. Like, he's not going to get to a bowl game this year, barring some miracle the last few weeks of the season. And I just don't know, unless you don't want to pay the buyout, what you see with Neil Brown. It's one of those things where if it's not working, you got to cut bait in college football. And I don't know what more you'd have to see at a Neil Brown to feel like you've got the right guy and the program's going in the right direction to break this streak of mediocrity. So normally I'd say yes, Morgantown, tough spot, tough place to play. But I think the fan base is checked out. I think they're sending a message to that administration. So I don't see them showing up in full force and being all juiced on Saturday. I would be surprised by that. So I'm really not too concerned about TCU in this game.
Yeah, they were down 30-16 to Oklahoma State, 28-10 to Kansas State, and it seems like they don't even blink, where that could sometimes you could, start to push or press and make mistakes, and they just keep coming at you. They're like a cat with 9 lives.
That's right, Smokey, they are. And, one thing about Sonny Dykes is he does have a tendency, his teams, especially at SMU, had a tendency to start off hot and then kind of, falter down the stretch. And you don't want to be in these double-digit holes and expect this team to come back to win. But here's the other thing, and I think Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State fell into this trap a couple of weeks ago, less so against K-State. I mean, they're on their third-string quarterback. What are you going to do? But I think Mike Gundy and Casey Dunn at Oklahoma State a couple of weeks ago kind of, all right, backed off. We're up 17 in the second quarter. Let's ride this thing to a win. It's not Gary Patterson's team. I mean, if you were up 17 on Gary Patterson, it was probably over. Sonny Dykes has a much more explosive offense. Max Duggan is as confident as he's ever been at that quarterback position for TCU, and they're not going to let up. You've got Kendre Miller, maybe the most underrated and under-talked about, at least skill position guy in the Big 12 at running back. He's second in the league in touchdowns this year behind Bijan Robinson. He's got actually more yards per carry than Bijan or Deuce Vaughn. So he's, to me, the most underappreciated guy in this league at running back. And you get a guy like Quentin Johnson on the outside, you can do some serious damage. You want to get off to better starts, especially on the road like this weekend. But this TCU team has far exceeded my expectations, and I expect a solid victory for them on Saturday.
Which team's trainers will be busier, Oklahoma State's or Kansas State's, in two teams that are really banged up and really want to win this game to keep pace in the championship race on Saturday?
Oh, man. I got to roll with K-State there. I mean, just because the quarterback position alone. I guess we'll find out more tomorrow on if Adrian Martinez has a shot to go on Saturday. If not, it sounds like it will be Will Howard. But they can't win a game. They can't win this game, at least, with Jake Rubley at quarterback, their third straight guy. And, he came in with high expectations. He was a 4-star recruit, but it just really hasn't panned out in the handful of appearances that Jake Rubley's had. So, and frankly, I don't love their chances with Will Howard in this game either. I just think Oklahoma State's defense is going to figure out a way to bottle him up. There's a reason they got Adrian Martinez in the offseason, and that's partially because they don't think Will Howard can be the guy to, take him to a Big 12 championship game in Manhattan. And frankly, I don't either. I thought he played well when he came in last week for Martinez, but he's not a guy to me that can win them this game against an Oklahoma State team that, as much as I know they lost to TCU, I still think blow for blow, that's right up there with any team in the Big 12 and should be a team that has as good a chance as anybody to win this league down the home stretch. You've got a veteran quarterback, a guy who's, been through the battles before in Spencer Sanders, and a guy who I think is the most underrated and underappreciated coach in America in Mike Gundy.
Iowa State, unable to get any conference wins at this point, but have Oklahoma walking in. Granted, Dylan Gabriel makes a difference for the Sooners, and we saw that with his return, but I don't know, Pete, this might be like the most fascinating game, not as far as hype or national attention goes, but this is a really interesting game to me with Iowa State and Oklahoma and Ames this weekend.
I completely agree. I mean, think about the storylines. If Iowa State loses, they fall to 0-5 in Big 12 play. And, I mean, nobody should question Matt Campbell. I mean, what Matt Campbell has done at Iowa State, no one ever predicted was possible at Iowa State. But 0-5 is still 0-5. I mean, that's a bit, even if it's all these close losses, a field goal either way, whatever, it doesn't matter. 0-5 is 0-5. Then if they get that win, and, Matt Campbell's played Oklahoma well, going back to his program-defining win, and I guess it would have been 2017 when they were 38-point underdogs and, beat OU in that miraculous game. He's played OU well, and you got to think, okay, off a bye week, at home, desperate for a victory, a great defense. Oklahoma's got no defense on their end. Why not? I mean, I'm still not sold on Brent Venables, despite the fact that they, beat Kansas a couple of weeks ago. So if Oklahoma loses, they're sitting at 1-4 in Big 12 play, and the conversation around Brent Venables gets even more interesting just because of what Oklahoma football's been for 2 decades. So I completely agree. No one's going to talk about that game nationally, but in the Big 12, the storylines around that OU Iowa State game are fascinating. Coming out of it based on who wins and who loses. I love that game for the reasons just laid out.
Bijan Robinson gets a lot of credit. He's a great player. He's phenomenal. I'd like to see him even get more carries. But is there anyone in the Big 12 right now who you think is a legitimate Heisman contender?
No. I mean, there isn't. Listen, let's just call it like it is. Being a quarterback of a team that's at a blue blood and in the top 5 helps. Now, could Max Duggan make a case? He's the guy I saw when I looked at the Heisman odds that technically has the best odds, I believe, in the Big 12 at like 50-1 to win a Heisman Trophy. But let's just be honest, for a TCU player to win a Heisman Trophy, it has to be the season of all seasons. For a player at TCU to win a Heisman Trophy. And I think Max Duggan is great, but, barring something unforeseen in terms of what he puts together the second half of the season, I don't see it. But it gets back to the bigger story here. I don't think there's a Heisman contender in the Big 12. I don't think there's a college football playoff team in the Big 12, as much as TCU's sitting there pretty undefeated at, number 7 in the country at this point. But they're going to find a way, I think, ultimately, to hose this league and not give this league the credit that I believe it deserves for the year that it's having. I just think TCU is going to lose a game at some point. If they lose 2, I wouldn't be shocked. I think the Big 12 champ will ultimately have 2 losses, and the 2-loss team is never getting in out of the Big 12 conference. It's just not going to happen. You've got this perfect storm showing up in the SEC with Alabama and Tennessee and Georgia and, whoever plays out of the SEC for the SEC championship, the loser's going to have 1 loss. It'll be a good loss. What does the committee do with that team? We've seen the story happen before. So I do not think that there is a Heisman contender in the Big 12. And, I don't think anyone's going to build up that kind of hype the next few weeks.
Yeah, Pete, let's face it. If a Big 12 team has 1 loss, they're behind it, no matter who that loss is to or when, because, they're just behind it. That's how it's been.
Absolutely. I mean, and, you don't have to remind TCU fans of being, number 3 in the country in 2014, blowing out Iowa State 55-3 and falling to number 6 out of the playoff picture. Now, the Big 12 was stupid and screwed itself from the get-go not having a conference championship game when they went down to 10 teams. That was dumb planning for a multitude of reasons we don't have to relitigate. But still, when you are number 3 in the country, you win a game 55-3 and you drop to number 6, I understand TCU fans and, frankly, all Big 12 fans being incredibly salty based on how this playoff system has worked the last nearly decade.
Pete, the Big 12 moving forward, Brett Yormark has discussed, in fact, a week ago that there could be some news in the next couple of weeks on a TV deal. Yesterday he was in Waco. I asked him the same question, and it seemed like it wasn't quite as emphatic, although Mack Rhodes joined us, Baylor's AD, and he said, no, I don't think it would be a surprise if something's not released in the next couple of weeks. What do you think will happen? Do you think they're going to have something to announce in a couple of weeks?
Well, I'll take Yormark at his word on that. I mean, he was pretty emphatic at Big 12 Media Days last week about it in Kansas City, talking about that very issue. And, I mean, I get it. I understand it if he continues with ESPN and Fox. But I do question it. I mean, we know where ESPN's loyalties are going to be. It's going to be to the SEC, 1, 2, and 3. It's going to be to the Big 10. And my fear is that the Big 12 ends up with a lot of those kind of ESPN Plus games, which I'm okay with, but it makes it, first off, selfishly, it makes it hard to kind of channel surf when you got one game on ESPN Plus. But I just worry as well that, their loyalty is going to be to the SEC, and the Big 12 not going to get that love from ESPN that, frankly, I believe it will deserve. And, I would hate to see Brett Yormark. I'd hate to see the Big 12 end up in this, long-term contract and then wondering where the love is, where the promotion is, and where the attention is for the Big 12 conference. And my fear is that very well could happen. I mean, I know that, the other networks have hopped on in different ways with some of the other leagues. But if there's inventory with an NBC, if there's still inventory with a CBS, it looks like Fox will be involved in some capacity. But I'd be looking there. Heck, TNT, Turner Sports, do they want to get into the college football game? They've done a great job on the NBA side of things. I would just, and we know Brett Yormark's an NBA guy, I would just keep some of those options open. But you know what? I'm not behind the scenes. I don't know what deal's on the table. And I do, trust Yormark to have this very good and strong vision for the Big 12. He clearly knows what he wants to do. He understands the TV market and the TV game and industry very well. The people around him do. That's kind of his specialty and bread and butter. So I'm willing to trust him, but I am not going to trust ESPN with how they've treated this league. And just go back to Bob Bowlesby. And Bob Bowlesby basically telling ESPN to shove it with how some of that realignment stuff went last year. It was the best thing that Bowlesby did before the Big 12 nearly collapsed, and thank goodness it didn't about 1 year ago. So I am hesitant to trust him, but I do trust Brett Yormark and his vision for the conference, and I'm willing to think if he thinks he's got a really good deal in front of him for the short and long term, then let's roll.
All right. Now, tell everybody about, again, the Heartland Sports YouTube page. We have what we do every afternoon, 3 to 6. You have what you do. So it's at Pete Mundo, Mundo, on Twitter. But let us know a little bit about, and some of our chat room people watch what you do as well in your podcast.
Yeah, well, I appreciate all that you guys do, not just obviously covering Baylor, but the Big 12 and college football in general. And, I'm up here in Kansas City, started Heartland College Sports now 8 years ago after spending time working in media in Oklahoma and then New York City, and now out here doing radio as well in Kansas City. But to me, in case you couldn't tell, I love this league. I don't think it gets the attention it deserves nationally. And Heartland College Sports started off as me with a laptop, and now we've got a full staff. We're reaching, millions of Big 12 fans every month on the website, on our podcast, and growing that YouTube page as well. So we appreciate you guys and everything that your fans and followers can do to check us out on all those different platforms. So I consider us kind of teammates from that respect of promoting this league, and we appreciate what you guys do as well.
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate it. Have a great week. We'll speak with you soon.
You bet, guys. Thanks so much.
Pete Mundo, again, at Heartland Sports. He's also a PD, as he mentioned, in Kansas City. Joins us to discuss college football. We appreciate what he does. And, again, it's kind